Please welcome to the stage Mary Frances Heck, Patrick Frisk, Susan Viscone, and Peter Whitcomb.
But there ain't no room to move. Get outside.
Hello, and welcome everyone to the Outside Summit. This afternoon we have three incredible guests. Thank you all for being here. This afternoon we're talking about the circular economy. The circular economy is something that touches many parts of how we buy gear, how we outfit ourselves for outdoor adventure. And here at Outside, the accessibility of gear and the sustainability of it is incredibly important to what we do and our mission of helping people get outside. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to each of our panelists for a quick introduction.
Thank you very much. So hi, my name is Patrick Frisk. I'm the CEO of Reju. Before that, I've spent my entire life and career in the sports and outdoor industry, running brands that are well known, and I see some of them in here today, North Face, Timberland, and others. So very happy to be here with this panel today.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Susan Viscone. I'm with REI, and I'm part of our sustainability work, but also our impact and new ventures. And I've been in the industry about 30 years, and I've sold a lot of product as a retailer, so really excited to also talk about ways that we can get that product out for a second use.
Hey everybody, I'm Peter Whitcomb, the CEO of Tersus Solutions. Been with the company about 5 years. Prior to that, I worked at REI for a handful of years, and prior to that, I was at Amazon, and I felt like I was very much kind of on the other end of this problem and contributing to mass consumption, and that really sort of catalyzed me to pursue this career in circularity, which we'll talk about today. So excited to get into the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And I'm Mary Frances Heck, and that's sort of a fancy title, but I oversee our editorial teams at Outside. So I work with Outside, Climbing, Backpackers, Ski, and all of the amazing editors and storytellers there. And so these brands help equip all of our audiences. So let's kick it off with just sort of an overview of what the circular economy is. Why does circular matter? And to the environment, to each of your businesses, and to the industry as a whole, and how it sort of all fits together. Kick us off.
Okay, so what we do at Reju is we take post-consumer textile waste and we break it down, take out the polyester, break down the polyester into its monomer, and then build it back into polyester again. Now, why is that important, do you think? Well, I spent my whole life selling stuff, and now I'm trying to clean up a little bit at the end of my career. And I don't know if anybody knows in here how many barrels of oil we use to make polyester for the textile industry every year. 1 billion barrels.
Whoa.
Okay. Is it anybody in here that doesn't believe that we talk about a finite material? Then I think I would like to have a discussion with you. We are talking about something that's finite. And that's one of the reasons. But I think the other reason is because it makes a lot of sense. And you know, for the panel here today, I think we're going to hopefully incentivize you to go think about how you can contribute to making this a more circular world.
Love that. Well, at REI, we've actually been in the circularity business for almost 60 years, and that started when our entire store flooded in Seattle. And even though we got insurance, our CEO, Jim Whitaker, at the time said, we don't want this product to go to use. People will find a way for it. So that started our very first garage sale. Any of you been to an REI garage sale? Yes, they're fun to get the treasure trove. But we also know our members really care about sustainability, and when we ask them what's the most important part of sustainability, they talk about durability. So, I'll talk a little bit more about why we care about durability. And then not only our current customers, but also the younger generation really cares about environmental and social responsibility. But pair that with the fact that a 25-year-old right now has 80% less disposable income than I did at 25, and so this value equation is also critical. And then, of course, we have climate commitments. I know a lot of brands in the room have climate commitments, and getting, products that are already used and back out there creates quite a bit of greenhouse gas and carbon reduction too.
Yeah, and so at Tersus, we kind of think of our North Star as getting sort of the most use out of stuff that already exists. And we've developed a waterless cleaning technology that uses recaptured CO2 instead of water to clean textiles, and have found that to be a really good application for cleaning secondhand items. And we
You
think
clean some of our stuff, thank you.
Yeah, we have a deep connection with REI, so this is fun to be on a panel with Susan. So we power part of the REI kind of rental and resale business in terms of just logistics and cleaning, handling, repairs, et cetera. But in terms of a broader sense, we think about circularity, there's sort of three stops if you think about it in terms of a circle. The first is, at the point of manufacturing, our brands building sort of what I call the tenets of circularity into their product. Is it durable? Is it recyclable? Is it resellable? That's sort of the first problem to solve. We don't really sit there. We sit kind of on the second step, which is once a consumer is done with it, what do you do with it? And we have emerged as sort of a resource for premium brands like REI and the North Face and Arc'teryx, amongst others, who want to resell their product and don't necessarily have the resources in-house to do that. And we've figured out a way to do that in an economically viable way. In cases where we can't sort of support that second, third, fourth life, that's where Patrick and Reju sit as sort of what we call a next best use path. And so there's this, I think we're maybe the most progressed in terms of sort of commercial viability, but there's a lot to be solved as we think about circularity and how this is going to come together to solve that sort of, billion barrels of oil problem.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because if you think about the linear economy that we've perfected over, the last 100 or 120 years or so in the textile industry, the problem with that model, right, is at the end of the day, we're externalizing all costs in that model. When we make something, we sell it, somebody uses it, and then ultimately, if it doesn't get into the circle that Peter and was talking about, and we simply just throw it away, there's a cost associated with that, and that's why circularity is an important concept, because when you do go to a circular model, you actually look at those costs and you make sure you address them, but you also make sure that everybody in that circle wins, and I think that is really the key. You can't do it alone. You need to do it together with others, and that's why we work together and we talk together. But it's also about action, and for yesterday, for example, I was out at Peter's facility with his team, and I've seen a lot of stuff in my long life, but I must say that I was blown away by the scale, and it really shows that what we're trying to do here is possible. So.
Okay, so each of you sort of plays a different role in the circular economy, and thinking about closing the loop. How does your company sort of approach from a consumer perspective? Who are your partners, inputs and outputs, and how do you message that or motivate people? And I think maybe Susan, this would be a good one for you to start with. Yeah. Thinking about, many of us would shop at an REI, maybe look for a used item before selecting a new one, or need something fixed.
Yeah, I kind of think of consumer participation in three ways for us. First, and Peter was hitting on it, I led merchandising for a long time. One of the key things is having quality standards, and we have an incredible return policy. We have that because we believe the products that we assort. So that's the first thing. You have to get something durable. I want a backpack to last as long as somebody wants it, right? And maybe that's 20 years, and maybe they want to pass it on to their brothers, kids. that's really what you're looking for. So you have to have that quality. But what REI also does is we have gear repair videos. We want people to be able to repair it themselves. We have repair services, and then we also have rental and resell. So resale is really a powerful tool for us. Last year, we sold over 1 million units through our resupply. So 1 million used items didn't go into a landfill.
I think we need to give you a big hand because that's amazing.
That's what I was like. I thought you were going to say challenge me to 10 million, but I like that
I'll
too.
do that later, Susan. I'll do that later.
But I just love that, that's a product out there that's getting maybe a second and third life, which is super important. But you heard it from Patrick. The thing we also have to solve, we build a lot of new product and we sell a lot of new product, and our own co-op brands is part of that. So we have to also get solutions upstream. So we specifically have a material circularity strategy, and the team shared number, it's not quite 1 billion, but 92 million tons of waste textile waste happens in the US alone. And so that is a ton of product that isn't getting used and put back in the system. So we right now, about 50% of our polyester and nylon is reused post-consumer waste. And so that's great, but we need to do a lot more. And so with that 92 million, the team really went out there and said, how do we do more textile to textile recycling? We announced a partnership with AmberCycle to do that. Not only is it great for our product, but also our climate commitments and making sure that we can reduce greenhouse gases.
Very cool. And yeah,
Do you want me to
actually,
jump
Peter, yeah, so inputs and outputs.
in? And customers?
And yeah, who are your customers?
Yeah, so our customers are brands. And, I think if we take a very extreme view, I sort of say tongue in cheek, like the best thing a consumer can buy is nothing. And really brands shouldn't exist. I mean, that's a very provocative view if we really want to solve the problem. That the reality is humans are sort of consumption driven, creatures, and consumption is not going to stop. So we really think about what are the mechanisms to sort of meet those consumption behaviors in a different way and sort of intercept and change those paradigms. And so we work with, just to give a very tangible example, like the North Face, they have their online renewed business, and we have 2 sources of supply to that. One is, customers try something on and they return it and it can't go back on shelf as new, and they consider that damaged. Historically, maybe they liquidated that item or it just sort of was forgotten and written off. Today, that comes to Tersus, and we clean and repair it, and it goes to their online renewed channel. The second, and I think which is more interesting and in a grander scale, is this idea of take back and tapping into consumers' closets. And so you have all this latent product that's underutilized in all of our closets. And I think we used to talk about this at REI, Susan, like every tent has a certain number of nights in it. Every backpack has a certain number of days in the trail. How do you maximize that useful life of this product? And we see it as our role to kind of, do that. And then as it relates to the end consumer, it's projected that I think this year almost 10% of all retail transactions are going to be through resale. So this shift, and it's largely younger consumers, and you have certainly, I'm not sort of rose-eyed glasses here, but on one hand, there's a lot of consumers still shopping fast fashion and like the contemporary, what's the coolest thing I can get to go to the, out tonight. But on the other, I think the younger generation is actively, like Susan said, seeking, circular options because they're shopping with their values. And you see with brands, newer brands, like, we just launched New Balance recently, over 70% of their consumers have never, their secondhand consumers have never bought from New Balance before because there was a price perception. And so their CMO is like, holy cow, this is an amazing customer acquisition channel. And relative to going and buying a bunch of social ads or PLAs, like this is awesome. So I don't know if I answered the input-output, but just.
Well, I think one thing that I saw yesterday, Peter, and I talked to your team about, which was something maybe I hadn't thought so much about before when it comes to resell, is the opportunity to not just resell it once. And I think that is also bringing, the case back to what Susan said, which is around thinking about how we make things going in, right? So making them more durable and actually making them last longer. And I think that's also where Regio comes in, our ability to actually make a very high quality product consistently that can be made into very high quality yarns that then can be made into very durable product. I think that it's to really think through that whole virtuous cycle, which is really important.
And I love, Peter, what you said about diversifying your customer base, right? We do see with resupply, it's a younger customer often, which if we can get a younger customer to come into REI and then stay longer, that's where the value is, really.
So thinking about profitability, it's really playing the long game. It's building a relationship and changing consumer behavior for the next generation, for the go forward. And thinking along the lines of technology, I'd love for you to speak a little bit about sort of the latest in technology, but also sort of the fundamentals of where you're getting your inputs, and then sort of what that end result is, and from a environmental perspective, but also from a what you've got left and what you're selling.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. One of the things that made me personally decide to embark on this journey was when I realized how big the problem is of what Susan talked about before, which was the waste itself. We produce over 130 million tons of textile, and we are throwing away or in landfills or burning about 85 to 87% of that. The problem is we're not really doing the math. That's every year. That's just not a sustainable way to go forward. But to be able to unlock that, we need to actually get organized. So it begins with aggregation of waste. We're not doing it anywhere in the world today at scale for post-consumer textile waste. We're also not able to sort it at the speed and in an automatic way like we would need to be able to handle these big volumes, because everything that's sorted today, for the right reason, is being sorted to be sold as an item. So it's actually sorted by hand. And when you think about taking this technology that you talked about to really be able to handle all of this waste, you need to be able to sort through very large volumes. So what you're really talking about here is not just a change in consumer behavior. It's also about a change in brand behavior in terms of building more durable goods. But it's also about building the infrastructure that's needed to actually aggregate, sort, and prepare all this waste for recycling or regeneration. So the technology for doing all of this actually does exist today. But the problem is, of course, that you need to organize it, and you need to create a demand for the output, to what Susan said here earlier, making sure that there is a home for the offtake. So that requires us to think in a circular loop the whole way.
And thinking about environmentally, not just things going into landfills, but the extraction of toxins and things like that. Could you speak to that a little bit in sort of your process?
I think that's one of the beautiful things. I mean, we've made a lot of pretty toxic things, let's say, over the last decades. And one of the issues today, as most people know about, is PFAS, of course. But there's so much more. In our textiles today, we deal with somewhere between 6,000 to 7,000 different chemicals. And in our case, when we open up to take post-consumer textile waste, that means we've got to be ready to take everything. So we will get 6,000 to 7,000 different chemicals. The good news is, because we operate at the molecule level, is we actually take all of those chemicals out, and we're able to treat them, right? And we put back something where we can decide, what would we like to have in this yarn and this fabric going forward. So we give it a second chance. We give it a second chance in terms of quality, but also in terms of cleansing, which I think is a very big opportunity.
And so because you're able to sort of dial that in so specifically, the outcome is a stronger material?
So the outcome is whatever you would like it to become, because ultimately, once you have the polyester at a certain specification, you can decide, how good you would like it to perform in terms of the yarn and the fabric. So you get a second chance here to actually make more durable product, which is great.
And that's something, maybe it's been in the last decade. I know from our teams, one of the challenges historically is that a recycled material wasn't always as strong or delivering performance. But now that's shifted, right? And I think that really opens up, especially for the outdoor industry, this to be a much bigger part of their material sourcing too.
Exactly. So we can actually make something, what a novel idea, better second time around.
Yeah. Going sort of back in the loop a little bit, could we talk a little bit about repair and what that looks like? And Tersus, from your perspective, Peter, thinking about the repair and cleaning to a standard that's ready for resale. And then Susan, thinking about REI's focus primarily in hard goods and repair in store to this point, but kind of thinking about how do you extend that?
Yeah, so a big part of what we do is repair services, and there's sort of two flavors of that. One is product that just is damaged through kind of a brand supply chain and they need repaired and back on the shelf, and that's sort of rinse and repeat, and we do that all day long. We have a facility dedicated to repairs here actually in Denver, so if anybody wants to come visit, let us know. But we have about now 22, 23 sewing techs, which is actually, it's taken us 6-7 years to build that muscle. It's a dying art. We do the warranty repair work for the North Face and Arc'teryx, and that's sort of the second flavor is you as a consumer go, hey, my whatever has failed, my Noopsy jacket, I'm going to send it in, and we repair it and get it back into use. And we're seeing more brands invest in that as, both in the spirit of kind of, durability and quality of the product, but there's also a legislative, sort of regulatory environment that is looming around, certainly in Europe, and I presume will come to the U.S. around right to repair. And it's the right thing to do. Again, back to this, like how much use does a product have? And if, a zipper pull fails, why not repair it? Because it's functionally still useful. And what we see is an amazing, just from a loyalty and acquisition play, that creates, brand is such a fickle thing, and there's so many factors that drive what makes a great brand. I deeply believe that, repair is an amazing tenet to build great loyalty in this environment and with this consumer. And so we're investing, profoundly in that business. I think we're probably the largest cut and sew repair operator in North America right now for kind of post-consumer products.
I think there's nothing that exists like you in Europe either, so I think you're probably at least 2 continents, Peter.
For REI, we actually just did a listening session with some members, and gear repair came up as like a really highly desirable. We do some, definitely, we repair bikes and skis. We do some in store, but I think it's an opportunity for us to go further. And I just had
Let's talk.
I know a guy. We're thinking about different ways to do that. One is just identifying what are some of the biggest issues, right? Tent poles, patches, like how can we have like quick fixes? So we're looking at options around that. I did just see from our Co-op Brands team that they're actually looking at like how do you just include a patch kit with a backpack when you sell it as like an add-on, right? You get your Rainfly, what about the patch kit? So making sure that we're upfront, giving the customer the option. And I absolutely agree that I think it keeps loyalty and it builds like just an expectation around how a company really is doing what they say is their long-term mission.
Peter, you touched on regulation for a second. I would love to pause there and kind of dig in a little bit. I think we're talking about consumers, we're talking about their behavior, and we all know that changing consumer behavior is the hardest thing in business. And so, what do you think is the role of regulation, and what do you hope it does or doesn't accomplish?
Yeah, Patrick will have a strong point of view here because I think his fate.
I know we have different perspectives on this one, which I really want to get into.
I'm not the first to jump up and down and say regulation, like let's regulate our way to a solution, because I actually believe in, by and large, market-based solutions that have to be sort of sustainable in an economic sense. But I think as it relates to this paradigm Patrick touched on, which is the linear model, you make something once overseas, you ship it halfway around the world, you sell it once, you never see it again, and you're like, good night. And then you do it all again the next year and you just change the colorways. It's just broken, frankly. And I think that is a paradigm. I think it's a human nature problem. And, you know, Patrick has said in these roles, Susan has as well, where, you know, retail is constructed to, hey, go sell more product. And that's just the reality of the business model. And so when I say human nature, I'm not even talking about the consumer. I'm actually talking about the decision makers within brands who are part of a system that says this is how you do retail. And I think it will require some regulation to change and incentivize that shift within these large organizations. But still, I mean, it's, you know, and Patrick's talking, we do have a relatively big operation, but as a percent of total sales, you know, resale and repair is still less than 5% of any given brand. So it's still a very small thing. And so how do you actually go, this is 20, 30, 40, 50% of our total sales? That's a dramatic shift. And so I do think, you know, there's more happening in Europe around extended producer responsibility. I mentioned right to repair, digital passports. You have SB 707 in California, which by and large ties into, if you're a retailer and you sell into California, you have to take ownership of the product post-consumer, and you have to have a solution for it.
Yeah, and I was going to build on that. I think definitely at RA, we're supportive of regulation that helps move the issue forward. I think our biggest challenge is state by state, right? And so we're spending time saying, how do you get more national solutions? And so we're working with the AAFA, specifically around EPR laws, just to say, like, we want the solution to be something that we can implement across state lines and not just in one place. And so I think that is one trick as the U.S. gets into this further. How do we come up with more standardized federal approaches?
Yes.
You've got a business on it a bit?
No, I think yes, we need a framework. I think that is tying into what Susan and Peter have said here. I think first of all, it could also if you have regulation that's not coordinated, it can become a disaster, right? And if it's not coordinated, what will happen is nobody will care about it. And you know, I look at this quite pragmatically through my own eyes of having run big companies. How would I act if I had a complicated, non-manageable system to deal with? I would most likely figure out how to avoid it somehow, right? So I think it's really important that we take this on and we do it in a sustainable way going forward. And I think part of that is just making sure that we're all coordinated. Can you imagine if we had an EPR system in the United States with 50 different systems? It would be a disaster. And on top of that, we might end up with 27 different ones in Europe. I mean, it's just not effective. But at the same time, we also need to make sure that EPR does not just become a shift in who manages the waste. To Peter's point, right? The EPR is supposed to shift the responsibility of the end of life from who is managing it today to the people that actually produced it. But if there is no other solution but landfilling or burning it at the end, then what are we really doing? We're just giving a new bunch of or a new organization responsibility to deal with it the same way that we had the old way of dealing with it. So we need to, of course, combine this with a circularity approach. And the good news is we don't need to do all of it at once, right? This is about a phased-in opportunity that I think can also help us move. And I think I would add one more dimension to this. And I think this is why we should all feel a bit of sense of urgency around it, because the world is different. We might not like the new world as much as we like the old world. And right now I'm trying to think of when was the old world? Was the old world before COVID or before Middle East? But I do think that the world we live in now going forward is a different world than where we were, let's say, in 2019. Supply chains have never normalized since 2019. They are now in a new state of flux. I'm part of a very large engineering company. We currently have about 80,000 people on the ground in the Middle East. I see what's happening every day, and I can tell you this: what was will not be again. And if you're sitting as a decision maker in a large company today, I think you need to weigh that in. So in other words, how do we make sure we build a more resilient outdoor textile industry? That's really what I'm concerned about. And I believe that part of that answer is becoming more circular and thinking through the full circle to make sure we're creating less dependency, more resilience, and actually have an ability to sustain ourselves going forward.
Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to add the supply chain disruption. One theme we hear from some brands, some leaders at brands, is this concept, of course we had this sort of tariff environment, and then, it has been this sort of persistent, protracted supply chain disruption. And you can't rely on sort of the old, rails, so to speak. And we always go, well, you have all this domestic supply here sitting in consumers' garages and closets and gear sheds. Yeah. How do you unlock that in a more intelligent way? And, it's a lot of product. I mean, if you take, the trailing 10 years of REI sales, that's tens and tens of billions of dollars of product sitting out there. And it's like, can you unlock 10% of that every year?
Yeah, and we work very closely with Goodwill here in the United States. And the Goodwill organization has, a very large footprint. And that's actually one of the largest recipients of donations in terms of textiles in the United States. And to Peter's point, the ability to unlock some of that, right, to a greater extent is very real, but it again requires us to get organized. And that's one of the things that we've just announced this year is the build of our first regeneration hub here in the United States in Rochester. And part of the reason we're building it in Rochester is because we're working with Goodwill and many other non-for-profits up there to aggregate waste in one of the most populous corners of the United States. And it's that kind of action that's needed now.
Does Goodwill sort of help you with the sorting problem?
Yes.
Can you go into that a tiny bit?
Yeah, so what's so incredible about the mission of Goodwill, I mean, I don't know if we have any Goodwill people in here, but I'll make a little pitch for Goodwill as well, is the fact that they put people to work, right? People with disabilities, people that have been incarcerated, and people that in general just might have a hard time getting a job. But more importantly, what they're also really good at is logistics. They've figured out how to get all of this donated stuff into their stores and manage it in a very, let's say, large scale way. So that is something that we're going to be looking at tapping into, because at the end of the day, they can't sell everything that they get, of course. And there will always be a lot at the very bottom that's unsold goods. And one of the problems that they have today, of course, is that they're getting more and more of the low quality, high polyester content, fast fashion and ultra fast fashion product that we can help put back into something that could be made into something more durable, perhaps.
Are you finding? I think in our previous chat we talked about the the items that are going to Goodwill are more heavily used than they have been in the past? And do you think that's an economic indicator about some people needing to hold on to things for longer?
Absolutely, and I mean, if you follow the news, and I don't know if anybody follows Goodwill in here, but they had their business is very good, but they're also having to work much harder because the yield of what they get in, of course, with lower quality goods, is also challenging for them, right? So it's creating challenges all the way down through the system.
It's a challenge for them, but is that where your operation can step in?
Exactly. So that's where we come in the end. So rather than either discarding it into a landfill or burning it or sending it somewhere where it shouldn't go, that's where we come in.
That's really, really interesting. And if we can stick with this for a second, can we talk a little bit about waste management as well?
Yep. Sure. And that's another, big unlock here in the United States. So just to give you a size of the opportunity here in the United States, so about 80% of all textile waste in the United States thrown in the garbage. So that's a lot. And that opportunity is there to unlock that, but the problem is you need to then create a new system of waste management. So we're working with Waste Management and Goodwill to actually restart curbside pickup. We tend to forget that we actually did some of this already back in the 70s, right? But then we kind of gave it up because it was a bit messy, and and of course we didn't have the technology to actually treat it back then. But we've done now 5 cities in the U.S. together with Waste Management and Goodwill, where we're doing curbside pickup to really see the appetite for the end consumer to actually put their textile waste in a separate bin again. And back in the day, we're talking, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, every home in America almost had a Goodwill bag where you would put your textiles in and take it to the Goodwill. So it's a little bit about thinking through restarting, new things that we used to do, but doing it in a modern context where we can now use, the technologies that are available at our disposal today.
Is Seattle going to be on that city list?
What are the cities?
I would love that.
Yes, we're looking at that.
And are those cities in the Northeast?
These cities?
Yeah.
It's been San Francisco, Phoenix, suburb of LA, I think Nashville, and one more place. I can't remember.
Okay, so they're around the country. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, because one of the things is you want to see the aperture for the geographic tendencies of people.
That's really cool. Peter, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what are the materials that you find the best success with cleaning, and thinking about that the items that can continue on after your process is complete.
Yeah. So.
Or is everything?
Yeah.
We send you everything.
If it's textile based, our technology does quite well with it. So just a quick history on CO2 cleaning. It originated with the U.S. military, and Raytheon did a project about 25 years ago in their R&D lab, trying to figure out how to clean hard to clean stuff like tactical gear and bomb parts, and it worked. They realized pressurized CO2 is a very effective cleaning agent because at pressure it turns to a fluid, and in a fluid state it has a very low viscosity, which basically means it can move through the smallest pore of any textile, or really almost anything. And so our founder actually bought an early version of this prototype, and it didn't work. Of course, he was running a dry cleaner here in Denver, and he rebuilt it and patented the technology, and now we're really the only and largest waterless cleaner in the world. And it's the most environmentally friendly way to clean. The intent, our founding story was really sort of centered around trying to kill dry cleaning, because it used perchlorine, and it's very sort of hazardous environmentally, and we tried selling the equipment for a number of years to industrial laundry companies and didn't have much success, and so we actually pivoted and were like, let's just make this equipment for ourselves. It has a number of unique patents, and try to work with a number of companies. And Patagonia was launching their wornwear business, and they had purchased a machine actually, and they ended up investing in our business. and they were really sort of crucial for us getting off the ground, because them, REI, Eileen Fisher were really the early movers of like, let's try to figure out the circularity thing. And in terms of the efficacy of clean, the tech, we work with everybody from, we can put these on running shoes in there to a Chanel couture piece. And it comes out totally sanitized, odorless. We have 2 other lines of business. We clean firefighter gear because that's a real human health and safety variable, where cancer is the number one cause of death for firefighters because of the PAHs and SVOCs in their gear. And our technology can remove almost 100% of that stuff. And historically, water at best can remove 55%. And so, it's very versatile, I guess, is the short story, and it's pretty cool to see. There's a little bit of a magic process Patrick saw yesterday when it comes out.
I'm still a little bit skeptical about the hang tag thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh yeah, my team's live. I mean,
Yeah,
we
Teams
can
Live,
actually. So we do projects.
can you tell about it? Because it's going to blow everybody's mind in here. So
Well, I think it'll blow certain minds. You have to be very interested in cleaning.
I think this crowd's into it if they're here.
Yeah. We're all here to talk about cleaning. I never thought I'd get in the cleaning business, but here I am. It's actually such a low viscosity, we can clean with hang tags. So it doesn't affect the ink on the tags. We do a number of rework. We actually just did a big project with Mammut. A lot of outdoor brands come to us and they're like, hey, we've seen it all. We've seen like garlic contamination, skunk, lice. And often these are containers that are coming overseas and they get contaminated, mold. And historically, a brand would often just sort of get rid of this product. And now we clean it, we can keep the tags on. It's a really low cost, efficient way to get product back into use. So we'll keep showing you. I mean, it's the real deal.
Well, I know. The reason I reacted to it was because so many times in my career, right? We've had those containers. Yeah. We've had to cut everything off. We tried to clean it in normal machines, and then re-tag it, and now it was like it was a mess, always a mess. And so this for me was like magic.
It is. If you are in the one role in supply chain where you deal with, this is truly a magical solution. Yeah.
Susan, I would love to hear a little bit about the efforts at REI to scale this for consumers and think about how do we less about changing consumer behavior and more about your operation. How do you make this thing a thing?
Yeah, well, one thing, we do some gear swaps, right? Like, who doesn't love a good gear swap? But I think on the horizon, we need to figure out how we make that more scalable. So it's not yet, and that's something we want to do in the future. But one thing we are doing is we have a great trade-in program, and you've got gear, you can come in, you can give it to REI, we'll evaluate it, you'll get a gift card that day, you can shop for something else. So continuing to get that word out, because what we hear is our members really value that we have resupply. It's like one of their favorite benefits. And so how do we, right now, I said we sold 1 million units, but we actually have a supply issue. We don't have enough coming in. So continuing to get that. And then the other thing that I want to hit on is sometimes there's a question on, is this a profitable business to do or not? But our margins that we make on resupply trade-ins are comparable to the margins that we make on new products. So it's less about that, and it's more about making sure that we can get it in. And then we have found that selling it through our stores is the most profitable route. And so if you go into an REI, you can always find a corner that's called resupply. And we have people that will come in weekly to check out what's new. And so just kind of a surprise and delight there too.
Peter, you mentioned you're on sneakers. Can we talk about footwear for a second and think about, there's so many complex materials that make up a shoe anymore. And thinking about the responsibility in Europe to take on from someone who sells sneakers is responsible for what happens to them after they're discarded. Is there an appetite for used shoes?
Yeah, I mean, I
was
believe
gonna
we
say-
both could probably.
We've gone into a few garage sales and like literally like 70 hiking boots there. So yes, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, our biggest growth channel right now is footwear by a wide margin. And I actually, if you had asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have been skeptical and said, I don't know. And we've completely disproved that there is a huge appetite for secondhand footwear. And we recently launched on, and I can't share kind of exact numbers, but they're, I mean, absolutely on fire. And some of that is the
Literally
brand, on fire, yeah. But we work with Ariat, we work with Keen, we work with New Balance, a number of smaller footwear brands. And in terms of turnover, we're typically turning the entire inventory we process twice a year. And the biggest challenge is similar to REI's, which is we don't have enough supply. And so they're also sort of amplifying their message around take back. We have, outside of our CO2 cleaning, we have specialized footwear cleaning equipment, some repair capabilities, and granted, to your point, repair is quite difficult on sort of a EVA, sort of multi-material shoe, but a Doc Martens who we work with, we can repair all day long. But I am very optimistic and excited, and they actually have a really big, they typically seed the program with damage returns, and they have a big open box return issue because size and color and fit issues. So this is a good viable channel if it can't go back on shelf. As it relates to recycling, and we work with also a really good nonprofit partner called Souls for Souls. So about 20% of what we handle in footwear can't be resold as secondhand. Almost all of that goes to a donation pathway where it does find a second home. And in terms of recycling, and Patrick can comment here, there's no panacea for footwear. It is incredibly complicated.
And I think that's why this is so encouraging to hear from Peter, because the complexity of textile, I talked about the chemicals and what have you. When you think about footwear, you actually get into a whole new category of chemicals. You get into all of the glues, and it's a different, a more difficult proposition actually than textiles. So if we can keep them alive for longer, that's a very good thing.
Okay, so what is the one thing that consumers can do to help close the loop? And I think both B2C consumers and B2B consumers, when companies are thinking about sourcing materials or sort of end of life, as well as individuals making purchasing decisions, from each of your perspectives, one thing.
Just one?
I mean, one category.
Well, one thing I think about is, I have a 30-year-old, or maybe it's a 25-year-old Sierra Design down jacket that I loved, and my ski blade caught the arm, sliced it open, and I have access to a lot of down jackets, and I could have just, turned that into my Goodwill recycling bin. But instead, there's great patches out there. I went out there and patched it, and I think, for consumers to realize, repairing your gear should be, a badge of honor, right? That you're getting further use out of it. And so thinking about how you can extend the life of something. And then the other thing I would say is, to Peter's point, garages and closets have a lot of things that aren't getting used. You're actually limiting somebody's ability to get out. Maybe somebody who needs a backpack for $70 instead of $400. And so think about you actually can create more inclusion by getting that back into the system. So, I encourage you all, go look through. I know that I probably have one too many packs and one too many tents. I don't need to have them all, right? Yeah. So what can we do to get them back in the system?
I love that.
Buy nothing. Since we're not going to do that, the second best thing is buy either secondhand, and that's not always viable. I just think fewer are better things. And that's how kind of I have evolved. Is it's often worth that investment to get the nicer down jacket that you can repair in 20 years versus the really sort of transient thing. And yeah, I think I'm always shocked at how few people are aware that almost every brand in the outdoor industry has a used offering. As much as there is adoption, it's, and even in my own family, they're like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "Just shop these sites." So I think there's, go check them out, spread the word. That'd be a good starting point.
Understand the opportunity of circularity. So inform yourself. Peter talked earlier about the circle. Understand how you can impact that if you sit with the brand, if you're a consumer. You've heard great solutions here today. It is happening. You don't have to wait. You can engage today.
Well, thank you. All right. Well, let's give it up for our panelists. Thanks all. Enjoy the festival.